Planning board to order. And the first thing is, as usual, our clerk has to read the statement on why we have to meet by Zoom. Paul.
In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, the August 18th, 2020 public meeting of the Falmouth Planning Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregations. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. 1, the meeting will be televised via Falmouth Community Television. 2, real-time public comment can be addressed to the planning board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. This application will allow users to view the meeting and send a comment or question to the chair via the chat function. Submitted text comments will be read into the record at the appropriate points in the meeting. Zoom login instructions. Instructions and the meeting link for this specific meeting can be found in the following web address. http www.falmouthmass.us/1112/planning board. Please plan on 10 to 15 minutes of preparation time to log in, though it may be less if you have previously used Zoom on the device you'll be using to access the meeting. 3, additionally, public comments may be sent in advance of the meeting to planning@falmouthma.gov at least 5 hours prior to the beginning of the meeting. Documents and audio or video files, may also be submitted via email. Submitted email comments and documents will be made a part of the meeting record and may be read into the record, summarized or displayed during the meeting at the discretion of the chair. For applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement matters before the planning board may appear remotely and are not required to be physically present. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement matters before the planning board may contact the planning department to arrange an alternative means of real-time participation if unable to use the Zoom virtual meeting software. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting to the planning@falmouthma.gov so that they may be displayed for remote public access viewing.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Now we move on again. Paul's on stage, the minutes.
I recommend approval of the minutes of August 11th, 2020 as written.
Second.
Pam, you seconded?
I did.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments? Okay, all in favor? Raise your hand, please. Okay, thank you. And then we have a request for a release of covenant. And it's Jensen Boxbury Hill Road. And Tom.
Evening, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes.
Evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Knowing that this is in fact our big picture night and we are trying to stay out of the weeds with current sort of planning issues, permitting and things like that, we got a request for a lot release from a lot from the 1990s. Typically, if someone's closing is involved in these sort of things, I try to get these taken care of as soon as possible. There was a house built on the property. It has been sold, and now they're selling again. And the closing attorney in this case found the covenant had not been released. I have, for the board's pleasure, if you like, a picture of what we're talking about. If I can share my screen for just a moment here. So this likely is the property at 515 Boxbury Hill. As you can see, the property fronts on Boxbury Hill Road. As part of the subdivision, there was likely a subdivision road that is supposed to have some sort of improvements to it down here in the bottom right of the screen. I told the closing attorney that we didn't have time to do a deep delve into what all the issues might be with this subdivision from back in the day. But in the case of 515, it's adequate size, it fronts on a road that's already existence. And it was my opinion that the board could take this action without interfering with their meeting too much in order for these folks to do their closing, which was originally scheduled for the 17th.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions to Tom in regard to this? Jim? Jim, unmute.
Excuse me. I haven't had time to read the minutes and why this lot was even included to begin with, because it doesn't look like it's part of the subdivision. But maybe it was the people that owned this. I'm missing some facts here, I think. I don't understand.
Tom?
Well, as I said, we didn't have time to delve into the history of the subdivision and why this particular covenant had not been released. But in the case of this one particular lot, because it sits on a road that's already been constructed, I didn't feel as though the planning board was going to be in peril if they released one lot. The original request was to release the subdivision from the covenant. But I suggested, based on what they needed to do and our ability to research this prior to the board's meeting, that we adopt for just this one lot at 515.
Does anybody have any objection? Jim, you don't feel comfortable with it.
I don't have enough information. I don't have enough information.
Right. Pam? Unmute, Pam. Pam, you're muted.
But I feel the same way. I don't have any history here to, sorry.
Does anybody else have any comment on it? Well, Bob?
Yeah, I don't see, I agree with Tom that it's on a road. What issues could there be with it? I mean, if it's not on a subdivision road that has a covenant that requires sidewalks or improvements or street lights or something, I don't see what the issue is with just releasing this one lot. I think that's a pretty good compromise.
There's nothing on that lot.
There's a house on it, Pam.
There's one house built in 1999 on the lot. The Jensens have owned the property and all the property that's around it. There are numerous Jensens owning other parcels in the neighborhood there. But in this case, lot 515, for whatever reason, is being sold by the Jensens and never released from the covenant.
Okay.
Well,
Then I withdraw my.
Why can't we hear the whole story?
Tom?
It's fine with me if the board's not comfortable voting this. I didn't want this to take this much time as it was.
Right.
We can continue it till the 25th, break out the history and see what the scoop is on the entire subdivision and bring it back in a week.
I think that would be advisable.
I do
Okay.
too.
Because we weren't going to spend this much time on it, and we have. Remember, we're an hour and a half that we agreed to spend.
Yeah. And I was trying to steal 90 seconds for this, so we're over.
Yeah.
So I will let the closing attorney know that the board didn't sign the lot release and it's scheduled for a week from now.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Now, under the planning board discussion, Union Studios is present. So I would like a motion to flip Union Studios and the multifamily housing subcommittee discussion.
So move.
Is there,
Second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're all in favor of flipping the agenda items. And Tom, would you please allow them to participate and introduce them to us?
Yeah, Thomas, if you could elevate Jeff Davis and Jeremy Lake, please. They're in our amongst our attendees. So for background, Jeremy Lake is with Union Studios and Jeff Davis is with Horsley Witten Group. Horsley Witten Group is partnering with Union Studios on the zoning analysis. and helping to develop the zoning for the development. We had a couple of questions that had came up previously that Jeff and Jeremy and I had been discussing. As sometimes happens, things happen. So we requeued that up. I think that we provided some additional information earlier about the sort of the scope where we're at right now, how we go about developing a zoning bylaw in the age of COVID, since those typical tools that we had at our disposal aren't with us anymore. So with that, Madam Chair, I have Jeremy Lake and Jeff Davis in the house, and I will turn it over to you, ma'am.
Okay, you all have a presentation and you've got questions to ask of us, so please take the floor.
Thank you very much. This is Jeremy Lake with Union Studio, and Jeff's here as well with Horsley Witten. I just wanted to thank you guys for having us. I'm going to let Jeff do a lot of the talking tonight, and I know you've got a tight agenda, so we'll try not to take up too much of your time, but we're excited to be sort of getting our heads back into this, and wanted to start with a discussion of the reset study that had been done by the Cape Cod Commission a few years ago, because we think it actually provides a great launching off point if the material and the suggestions that were in there were an appropriate sort of starting point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, but I'll certainly be here to help with the discussion and questions as needed.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, and nice to meet you all. It's always awkward to be introduced to people for the first time over Zoom, but I'm really happy to be working with you in Falmouth. So what I was hoping for this evening, and again, we don't expect to take up a whole lot of your time, but as we start this work and start diving into what your zoning needs are and your design needs are to realize your vision for the Davis Straits corridor, really wanted to get a sense from you tonight as to how much buy-in there is among this body on the reset study. So I have a series of questions related to the reset study, and just wanted to, and I want to reiterate that we don't have to come to conclusions tonight. I just want to gauge your gut reaction to certain components of the study. If you feel like, yeah, we're 100% behind it, and let's make it happen, that gives us some very clear marching orders. But I think it's very important to pause early on and say, was there anything in that study that gave you pause, that you might be concerned about, that you didn't like at all, that we should already plan from the get-go to take another direction on. So again, just wanted to take some time to go through that with you. So first question is related to the character areas. So if you recall, the Cape Cod Commission had split the area into 4 character areas. Basically the Davis Straits commercial cluster, basically the main commercial intersection, the neighborhood commercial clusters off Route 28, the village mixed use, which is everything else along the spine of 28, and the residential mixed use, which was everything behind that. So the first question is, and again, not down to the nitty gritty, but as a concept, do these distinctions make general sense? And do you think it makes sense to have slightly different zoning standards based on those areas?
Tom? Unmute, Tom.
I'm looking for the button on a very small screen. So just for background, I have the entire Davis Straits plan queued up on another screen here if we need any graphics for any of those things, as well as a map of the area, just in case anybody needs any of that stuff for a refresher of some of the things we're talking about.
Well, Tom, I think that myself, I'm having a hard time bringing this forward in my mind because it's been a long time since we've actually looked at that full Davis Straits and what Jeff was talking about.
So I believe I have the visual character up on the screen as we speak. So
Yes, and if you scroll down, Tom, to page 36, that will be the map of the proposed character areas. There we go.
Okay.
So this was the general concept that was laid out for you all by the Cape Cod Commission. And so wanted to get, again, not in a great detail. Obviously, this was not drawn to scale or to specific parcels, but as a concept, are you comfortable? So the orange areas are those core commercial clusters. The yellow is more of a neighborhood focused cluster. And then as you can see, straddling Route 28 is that village mixed use, which is a higher density. And as you step off of that, you're a residential mixed use.
Okay, so I think I'd probably rather have that disappear now if the board agrees, so that we can all see the board and have more of a conversation with the board. May I have comments to, yes, Pam, but unmute, thank you.
The only thing I would be interested in is the area that talks about the multifamily residential. That particular area, because we're talking about multifamily. You know what I'm talking about on that?
The
Page.
residential mixed
Residential.
use.
Yes.
Mhm.
It says multifamily down at toward the right bottom.
Oh, the multifamily transition to multifamily residential. Is that what you're referencing?
Yep. Yes.
I believe the Cape Cod Commission was just pointing out that you have predominantly commercial along the corridor, and then as you move out from the corridor, it might transition to more residential multifamily as opposed to commercial uses, with the exception of the little commercial node, the neighborhood node. But my understanding is, as written, there would be mixed use allowed within the entire district, including housing.
Right.
Charlotte.
I'm generally in agreement with it. I really like the plan overall and wouldn't want to hold it up, but I have two comments about this. One, we are trying to, at the same time, we're looking at form-based zoning in Davis Straits, which is a long-term plan. We are also looking at multifamily zoning. That's very important to us, and we don't want it to be that long-term. We'd like it to happen sooner. And I'm sort of disappointed that the area that is now the plaza that includes Walmart isn't being included in this plan, so that whatever zoning comes up for multifamily housing will become part of the Davis Straits thinking, because I feel that it could make it happen sooner. And there's quite a bit along there that's in the B2 zone that would be included if we were to move in the direction we think that we're going. So is there any possibility of moving the boundaries of this? I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, of moving the boundaries to include that area beyond Stop and Shop, going up to what is now the road that heads down into that entire shopping center. And including Walmart Plaza, that whole plaza area. Within the Davis Strait document, that area is included in several of the drawings of the area, the layout, so that it's part of the discussion of the whole document. Yeah, see where the red line is now? Thanks, Tom. See where the red line is? That if that were the area we were talking about, that would include quite a bit of spacing that's planned by the Cape Cod Commission in this study to be multifamily housing. And it would help us achieve another goal.
So if I may, so this is a map that we did using our existing parcels with the Davis Straits overlay. The area you had talked about with the plaza is this area just to the outside of it where the transition, this is the area where it said transition to multifamily. You know, one of the things we've talked about in developing the multifamily zoning bylaw is, and one of the concerns about is what does multifamily housing look like? What's the impact of that at, you know, the densities we've talked about on a lot per acre. So I think one of the things that we can look at in tandem is our multifamily zoning bylaw, but at the same time, sort of keeping it out of the actual area of the study itself, which would make the property to the east, the plaza where Walmart and those things like that are certainly game for that type of development. When we go back and look at the Davis Straits study, you'll see the existing zoning in the area, and most of the zoning in the area is B2 in the Davis Straits study area. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so we can maintain eye contact again here.
I wonder if the rest of the board could comment on including that area.
Paul had a comment he wanted to make or a question. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. I think the concept is great. I think the location is good to try to implement this. Cape Cod Commission has supported it. I think we generally support it. My only concern is this is a major, major change for people in the town of Falmouth. And I think we have to move slow and get the buy-in from not only the commercial people like at the mall there, but a lot of the homeowners along the lower edge of that. This is a very significant change, and I think it's an important change. I would hope we do that. But I think we really need to start getting the buy-in from people in the area that they understand what's involved. Because it's going to have significant changes in the very important part of the town of Falmouth.
Does anybody else want to make any comments right now? Pam?
Yeah, I think this is the time when we really think about how we do outreach. We've been not very successful in getting people in for either form-based zoning or this whole Davis Straits project. And I agree with Paul. You know, we're going to have to do quite a bit in order to get people both knowledgeable about what we're thinking about and their ideas, which is why I think it's great to have the charrettes. You have people come in and, you know, look at the area and see what people are thinking of in terms of what would they like to see there with the zoning as it is.
Bob?
Oh, to address Charlotte's question about extending down to the mall, I think we agreed initially just to keep it in this small area to begin with, because that was along a major corridor, as opposed to the mall kind of sitting on a back lot. So we wanted to look at a smaller area and see how that flew. To take on a big, huge chunk, I think would be a bit too much for the town to take. I think people would feel overwhelmed by it. But when we're talking about a little corner right now of that property, I think that's the way to go.
Okay. When the plan was first presented to us, I think we really very much loved what the commission did, the whole reset concept. The major problem that we saw is it's probably going to take longer than I'm going to be alive to get it to happen, because we have multiple owners. We have some very large property owners. To make anything happen there at the plaza, that is going to have to be some very coddled arm twisting, I think, of the owners of that whole plaza area. But that we thought was very ripe for redevelopment, and we thought that the town would, if given the concept, love, if we could do a three-dimensional mock-up of it, would really love what they could see. But it is also going to have to be economically feasible for the owners to make the changes. That's going to be a huge challenge. Now, one of the things working in our benefit is that these large malls are in trouble. When you read that Simon, the largest mall owner in the country, is reaching out to Amazon to see if their empty stores can be changed into, or Amazon is reaching out to them, however it went, to see if some of those empty large stores could be changed into warehouses for Amazon. We know that the large malls are in trouble. That gives something to our favor. We also know from Jim's comments that one of the owners there, Kimco, has been doing this kind of thing to some of the malls that they own elsewhere. So it seems to me that if there could be a very successful outreach to those owners, we would get ahead of the curve. But we really did like the concept there of mixed use, affordable apartments, because by virtue of the size, we thought that they could be kept affordable. So that's a little bit of input for me. Does anybody else have any further input to Jeff or Jeremy? Yes, Jim. And unmute yourself, Jim.
You just. you
Jim, you're
muted yourself.
muted.
Back,
You're muted, Jim.
I
Okay,
know.
now.
I was using the space bar thing. It took me in and out, in and out.
Oh,
We've been working on this thing for a long time. And I just wanted to let you all know that I have communicated with Kimco about this about 10 or 15 times. I've also, not that I was doing it representing the planning board, but about 3 years ago, I had the Rose family come to me. They all came to my office, and every one of those property owners, and I told them what we're talking about doing here. So there's been some fairly, and we actually did have a stakeholders meeting. But very few people showed up,
right.
but it was publicized. So we did a few years ago have a start on this, and this is like a restart. And so we're not starting from zero here and communicating with them. And my only question is, I would like to see, I've always thought that what Union Studios presented us, the 2.5 acres, 20 units, and the square footages all were accurate. I would just like them to say, yeah, I like to see, here's the amount of square footage of units, parking, everything that fits in this thing. Here's what it is. They don't, and maybe one building to show what it looks like, and a site plan, just to get an idea, so people, when we take this to the next step, know what we're talking about. Because all we really have is that little sketch they did that I always liked, but I just need some harder numbers behind it, that's all.
And I think this is Jeremy. I just wanted to respond to that. I think that's one of the challenges here, right? Is that it is a big area. There's no sort of set plan for how it necessarily plays out. This is about sort of putting in place the regulations that would guide that redevelopment over time. So in some ways, I don't know how we would do harder numbers and harder lines than what we did, as that sort of quick little illustrative study. But, I do think one of the nice things that the reset study tries to get into, in addition to the regulations, is what the real economic benefits are to a lot of this sort of stuff. And I think that's where the landowners hopefully would recognize that by changing the zoning to allow more mixed use and more density, and conceivably the land value could go up and the potential yield from that land could go up, but done in a way that is contextually appropriate and something that the community at large is looking for. So I think the goal here is a win-win. And, again, the reset study starts talking about those issues, but to Jim's point, getting really into the weeds of it is a much bigger task, but it's something that hopefully folks will be able to get a better sense of through this.
Right. And once we have zoning written for the different character areas, then you might be able to use those dimensional requirements to say, for example, on this property, if you were to institute that, here's what it could look like. Because we've got to remember that, as you said, Pat, this is not a redevelopment plan. It is not, you do not have control over all of these parcels. This is a menu of options for private landowners to make decisions over time. So there's what we're working on today, and which is going to have to be concurrent with other efforts by the town in terms of incentives or active marketing and negotiation about specific properties once you actually get to the implementation phase. But what we're to do is to make sure that your zoning will allow your vision to occur over time. And one follow-up question I had, I understand from Tom and from what Jim just said that there has been discussion among the property owners, particularly the commercial property owners in the area. It seems like based on the reset study, there was limited involvement from the community at large on these concepts. And so one thing that we will be working with you on is at what point we start rolling things out to the public. If you're, again, that's one of the points of this conversation. If you're gung-ho about this concept and we want to use this process to better vet that with the public at large, then that's something that we can start with early. If there are concerns that you have about the vision in the reset study, then I would suggest that we try to work through those a little bit first before we go out to the public.
Well, Jeff, I'm not entirely sure that just because our board thinks it's a wonderful thing, that the community at large would think it's a wonderful thing. Because we have not had that kind of outreach to the community at large. We tried, but it was a brand new concept, and you have to present that multiple times, I think, before there's any kind of mental grabbing of this. But the other thing that I think would be a big question is, do we do it as a total rezoning, or do we do it as an overlay? We don't know these things. These are questions that we hope we'll get some guidance from you all on.
Absolutely. And that was actually one of my questions for you this evening, was whether or not you have you're absolutely right. I want this conversation to do is not say, okay, the planning board has figured everything out. Here, public, this is what we're doing. It's more to, if there are things about this vision that definitely won't work and need to change before we start vetting it again with the public, that we can make those adjustments. And I lost my train of thought on the other. The question about overlay versus a base zoning change, and there are pros and cons for both. And I wanted to see from you tonight if you have a gut response. I think the response from the Cape Cod Commission was a recommendation to have an overlay zone. Honestly, that resonates with me. We're working with another community, Massachusetts Stoughton, right now on their downtown zoning, and they're opting to go with a new baseline zone with sub-districts, which could actually work here very well if you're comfortable with the character area concept. So there really are pros and cons of both, and again, yes, that's something we'll be working with you on as we move forward.
Does anybody else? Yes, Pam.
I was just going to say it's very, very difficult without pictures. And I don't mean more cartoonish pictures, but actual photographs of housing that looks like what we're proposing. Because people have a very difficult time grasping in the abstract, this is what 20 units per acre would look like. And so I think we have to get more technical in how we present the actual concept of those multifamily zones, what it would look like, how it would blend into the area, how nice it would be for someone to live and perhaps even work in the same area without even needing a car, like they did at South Weymouth. So I just think there's a lot to do. And I think it's too big a hamburger and we have to take one bite at a time. It's just not that easy to grasp this. It's a huge change for this community.
Does anybody else? Yes, Charlotte.
I think what Union Studios is trying to do tonight is help the board move along to the point where that's possible. We're being asked now, do we go along with the idea of the 4 character areas? It's not all going to be the same. It will be different. 4 character areas. Is that a good idea? Rather than trying to, you can't make a picture of something, Pam, until you've done the underlying conceptual thinking.
Oh,
Thank you, Charlotte. And I just would add to that we don't want to go from scratch to the public. We want to get a better sense of, again, I don't want this to be, all right, the planning board has figured this out and here's what we're doing, but rather we've thought about this and we think this is worth advocating for. We think this is worth selling to the public because once we know that, once we know what you're comfortable getting behind and fighting for the community, then we can start building marketing materials to explain this is why we would make this change. This is how it would benefit the community. We can use a lot of the information from the study about how it would impact economics, how it would impact character, how it would provide opportunities for people to live and work in the same place and not use their cars everywhere. So there's a whole narrative that we can start to build when we're presenting these ideas to the public. But yes, as Charlotte mentioned, our hope is to go through this, see where your comfort level lies, where you're passionate about this vision, so that we can start selling it as a concept, and then we can circle back again on the details once the general public is like, yeah, we want this too.
John?
What is the difference between just having the one district and having the 4 zones? What is the difference? Is it design difference? Is it density difference?
I can answer that real quick, Jeff, just because I think that the intention with the 4 zones, I think, was to try to create little varied characters within that district, right? So that the district wasn't one universal character that you would know when you were on the main street versus maybe on one of the secondary streets when you'd hit the little sort of commercial pocket at the main intersection. So I think the intention on the Cape Cod Commission's point was just to make sure there was that variation, the way that you might expect to find if you walk through the historic Main Street of Falmouth. That the character right on Main Street is different than when you sort of turn the corner and get sort of one block back from there.
In what way? Could you give me an example? I'm having trouble picturing this.
Sure.
Yes.
So at an intersection, for example, you may have different dimensional standards where maybe the height could go up a little higher at those key intersections. Maybe you make sure that more of the building is fronting the street in those areas. Maybe for the areas that are on the secondary streets, your dimensional standards are a little different. You allow for maybe bare setbacks. You don't necessarily have as much transparency in the windows on the ground floor. So there are different things related to dimension, related to height, related to parking, and potentially related to uses that are allowed that would be different from area to area.
So a good part of what you're talking about is streetscape.
Yes.
Part of it is streetscape. Part of it is streetscape. Part of it is setbacks within the lot. Part of it is use allowances.
And how critical is it, in your mind, this whole Davis Straits area to be form-based code? Is that mandatory, or can it be optional, or can a different area be form-based code and then the next zone is not form-based code?
I mean,
Or can all of it not be form-based code?
you don't have to use form-based code. I mean, what you will probably end up with here, and I'll let Jeremy chime in as well, is a hybrid. Like, you want to be able to, a pure form-based code does not care about uses, right? You're caring about what's the shape of the building, how does it relate to the street? And those are all things that I would envision us addressing regardless. The balance comes in as to, how much you care about controlling the uses or the density. One of the questions I had for you this evening is related to residential density. I think one of the suggestions in the reset study that a lot of downtown areas are considering is, you regulate the form of the building and its shape and its mass, and then as many residential units as a developer chooses to fit in there, and whatever the configuration is of bedroom sizes, you let the market drive that, and you don't put an artificial cap on the residential density. So I wouldn't get too hung up on whether it's form-based or not, but I would say that whatever happens, we will likely be making design recommendations that are akin to a form-based code. But it's not magical. It's just really a matter of whether or not your zoning has standards for that massing and setback and how the buildings relate to the street. Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
I want to ask another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you say that other towns have buildings that are like a form-based situation. Are those cities or are those small towns like Falmouth is?
Both. Absolutely. And in fact, I would say more small towns are using form-based code because more small towns care about their character in a very specific way than larger cities. I find personally the larger cities are, I don't know, they let the market determine sort of what that's going to look like, and it's the smaller towns who are really interested in their character who have been adopting form-based codes.
Yeah, and
So
I'll even,
the people that I spoke to, uh, form-based code is complicated to them. It's very, very difficult to understand the concept of it. And it, as you said, this has to be something the community is going to buy into. The planning board has to buy into it and the community has to buy into it. That's why I'm asking these questions. How important is it to be form-based code? Like maybe just the plaza could be form-based code, the rest of it optional or not form-based code. That's, I'm just trying to get an idea here. And then one last, maybe not one last thing, but listening to you guys talk, it is going to be very difficult to picture this without some pictures. It really is, it is going to be almost impossible. I hope you understand that you know, you guys are planners, you know, you've done this multiple times. This is our first venture into this, and it's taken a long time just to get to tonight. And you know, we've talked about this being a 50-year project. We don't want to take 50 years to get it approved.
absolutely. And so I would offer a few things there. One, I don't think there's any form of zoning that isn't complicated. At least not that I've come across, right? It's a tricky thing to try to navigate through and understand. I do think that the both what I saw in the reset study and also our experience in Falmouth when we did the community resiliency by design effort with the Cape Cod Commission a few years ago, when we were talking purely about the housing typologies and the moderate density types. I think what resonates with people is understanding that at the end of the day, what everybody wants is that sort of village character, that walkable urbanism, mixed use, options for places to live, not just one size fits all. And at the end of the day, that's what I think this code is trying to prioritize. And then behind creating a place that has that sort of village feel, all those regulations about what you can and can't do, including uses, including some of these other things. So I totally agree that we'll have to make very compelling and readily understandable visuals. And we can use photographs of existing places. We can use photographs of Falmouth, probably to reinforce a number of the issues that we're trying to get across. And I know with that previous effort, the community resiliency by design that we did, you know, doing a visual preference survey where you put two things side by side that are meant to compare one very particular issue was a very effective tool for getting people to sort of.
When I look at I'm sorry, when I look at the Davis Strait map, almost every parcel has is full of structures, except where the plaza is. And I think the plaza is where I would like to see some kind of a design, and as other people said, to use 20 units per acre for housing on the second floor and the third floor possibly. We got to have something, a visual. We really have to have that. That's how I feel about it anyway. All the other parcels have structures on them. I own one of the parcels. I have a structure on it, and maybe if this bylaw got passed, either myself or someone in the future would enhance this lot and maybe add one more apartment or something here. But it's all, everything already has a structure on it except the plaza, and it has structures, but it certainly has a lot of room for improvement. And that's what we've talked about from day one.
Yeah, and I would offer that I think there are portions of this area where the structures currently respect the kind of pattern we're talking about. So, you know, as a case in point, when Tom called up earlier that map, there's sort of the northern central section that might even be where you're building this, I don't know. But there are a number of historic buildings that kind of play by the rules that folks thought was the good model to think about. And the way the zoning is written currently, someone could decide one of these is getting a little old. I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to put a Cumberland Farms on the back of the lot with a parking lot in front. And the feeling is that's exactly the opposite of the direction we want to go. So in some ways, the code will probably reinforce the pattern that exists on, maybe half of the parcels in Davis Straits. And to your point, it's the ones like the plaza where it doesn't fit the mold. And that's where you would hope that someone, when they redevelopment, I mean, those buildings aren't going to last forever, right? I mean, the, Christmas tree shops wasn't built to last another 100 years. So, redevelopment comes sooner or later, and you're trying to make sure that you're steering people in the appropriate direction. So,
Exactly.
Jeremy, the impetus for this came out of the local comprehensive plan committee. And it was Bob Leary and Jim Fox and I who were part of that. And a lot of what we were doing is just sort of blue skying. This originated with, we're going to get what we deserve unless we start planning for that area because it's ripe for renewal. And so as a town, we should let it be known what we want that to be looking like. And the three of us thought we really wanted it. I don't want to compare it to Mashpee Commons, but in a kind of a way, yeah, but we don't want it to be Mashpee Commons light. This is Falmouth. We want it to be a place, as Jim was fond of saying, where you can live, work, and play. And it's a significant number of acres in there. So that's the concept that we came up with. And the commission and you all put that a little bit further down the path towards our vision of what we wanted to see. Bob.
And I think that's one of the reasons we were leaning towards form-based code, so that we wouldn't get a big box store tearing down those houses just downwind from CVS and putting up a Best Buy or something. And if we have form-based code in place for that area, we would have more control over what things would look like going into that area. So I think including the form-based code as part of this is important.
Jim.
Just quickly to John's concern, I think that a really strict design review is very similar to form-based code. So you don't have to buy into form-based code for the whole place, but design review on what you build and what it looks like on all the other places still works. So you cannot, the words, it's semantics and detail. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, and I would agree just very quickly to say if the concept of form-based code is scary and is a roadblock for people, then we don't have to talk about it in that context. I mean, you're right, Jim. This is not really new stuff. It's just a way of approaching how buildings are designed and how you can get the vision that you want for this corridor. So we don't have to make it scary or inaccessible in how we talk about it.
Charlotte?
I'm recalling now the hearing that we had that was in the Herman Room at the library that was pretty well attended. Not the first one where only Mr. Hargraves came, where he said, if we don't have something concrete, we're never going to get the stakeholders, which is true. But the one where we had the Herman Room, and a lot of people turned out, and people weren't that skittish about form-based code. They were generally in favor of having some control over what the changes would look like along that stretch. They don't like the way it looks now. A couple of people were pretty clear that they didn't want it to look like Mashpee Commons. I don't know what in their minds they saw as Mashpee Commons, but that seemed to ring a couple of bells with a couple of people. But overall, they were in favor of it. They weren't against it. And I thought we as a board were ready to move on form-based code. We seem to be backing up rather than going forward. That the idea of form-based code, yeah, it's what Jim says. We've got a site plan. We now have a design guidelines that are moving us toward form-based code. Form-based code is intended to make the process of approval faster because the developers, the owners, people who are going to put money into this can see ahead of time what Falmouth wants stuff to look like, and they can make stuff that looks like that. And if they want to make it look a little different from that, we're up for that. Come and give us a proposal, but don't give us a 5-story cube because we're not going to approve it. It's very general directions are what you get. And I would imagine the product that I hope the product that Union Studios is going to give us is going to build on the Davis Strait Reset Plan as it is, and give us more pictures like the ones they produced that Jim has been using for what we would do, perhaps what we would like to see for the area that's now Staples and Friendlies and Starbucks. So we've already seen pictures of what it could look like. We're gonna, I think Union Studios, aren't you guys gonna make us more of the same, but have more detail on it? So that rather than having to just read such and such a setback, such and such a height, you'll have some pictures. That's what you produce. And it will tell us the key questions we have to ask ourselves is what kind of zoning, overlay, or start with a new base? That's a fundamental question that the board can wrestle with and answer. How big an area? It was clear immediately that we want to stick to the area that we said first. That's the area we're going to do. It sounded like people wanted to do the 4 characters. Let's not go backwards. We were
Yeah,
on
again,
the
that's a primary concern for tonight is, this vision, are you still behind this? If the answer is yes, then that's what Jeremy and I move forward with, and we can start producing all the things that we've been talking about this evening.
And it's not to say that can't evolve and change a bit
Of
too.
course.
Like one of the things I would say is I thought 4 character districts for this area might be a little much, like the nuances might be so subtle, but we'll hash that out as we kind of develop it a little bit further. And we say, what is really different from the commercial center versus the neighborhood center? And maybe between the group working on it, we realize like they're really kind of the same, or it's one little nuance about if it's on Main Street, it can be 3 stories. If not, it's 2 stories, and we don't need to create an entirely separate district for it. So I think it's really the general message we're hearing is that we should continue to sort of build on the lessons of the reset study, evolve them, push it forward. What Jeff and I were really wanting to make sure is you guys weren't going to get in here and go, oh my God, that reset study,
Right.
that thing was
Yeah.
ridiculous. We all, didn't want to talk about that anymore. It got it all wrong, but it doesn't seem to be the tone that we're picking.
But the rate of change is determined by the owners of the building. The building that John owns is a building that fits in anyway. That would probably stay there, or maybe just, if he keeps up his maintenance, it would be okay. The other houses right in that stretch, they help with the character. So it's not all going to happen at once. It will happen so slowly, and it won't even be this planning board. We'll all be dead. It'll be another planning board. So this is just a guide.
I haven't made plans that far in advance yet, but in terms of checking out. But that being said, this is such an enormous paradigm change for this community. And I think we heard that over and over again with we don't want a Mashpee Common and all that. But I'm just wondering,
3 times.
yeah, from Jeremy, do you do sort of a global view? You have this area, what it could look like under certain circumstances, with a variation of the type of housing, the type of businesses. I think people love to be involved in feeling they have a voice in the change, that the change doesn't just happen on top of them, but they're involved in that process. And I think that with our original concept that Jim presented of what it could look like in the plaza there, with homes and businesses and the kind of flow of cars on the interior, not the exterior. I think people are just going to need to see that. How does this transition from what we have to what we want to see the town look like? And I think you have 3 sets of people here. You have summer people that have owned a property here for years, spend the summers. You have people that are here year round, except they leave for 3 months during the winter. And so for me, I still don't have a sense. I've been here almost 5 years, and I still don't have a sense of what people truly want to see, any transition from what we have to what we could have to make it better. I'm having difficulty finding people that are invested enough and interested enough to push forward and make this happen. I don't want to sound cynical, but
John,
The concept plan that Jim had before was beautiful, but if I understood it correctly, it doesn't really fit on the lot. It wasn't real. It was a great idea and it looked good, but it didn't really fit on the lot.
Oh, it didn't?
No.
It
Am I
did.
mistaken or am I correct on that, Jim?
Jim?
I disagree. That is what Jeremy and his team presented, and that's what we wanted. I did want to see a more detailed schedule so I could argue against that point. But that's what we need. We need a little bit more detail to say, here, I tried to model, we had so many units and all this, and everyone said, oh, you're just blowing smoke. We just need a little bit more detail to see that it actually works. I think it does work, John. I disagree with your statement that it doesn't work.
Well, I hope it does. But the other thing is when we had some of the original concept plans, and it showed green areas, it showed a small park. If I remember correctly, where that park was drawn on the plan is the intersection where they're now proposing to put a Wendy's. And so I'm just, no, different
No, it was
location.
it was internal in the plaza. It was a small park area internally.
You're blocks off. You're hundreds of yards off.
Okay, my mistake. But the point I'm trying to make is things are going to happen with or without us. And I think the faster we really get going on this, the better off the town's going to be. And a final question in my mind is, if there is increased residential density here, substantial increased density, because that's where we want it, the sewers there, the transportation's there, how will the Cape Cod Commission treat it? Are we going to be able to get relief from their current laws, or how will it be treated?
Okay. We've got to move along because we had agreed that this is a special meeting and we wanted to keep it to an hour and a half total. So I don't know whether Jeff and Jeremy, you've gotten the questions answered that you hoped to tonight.
So do we agree with the 4 zones?
And again, it doesn't have to be, yes, we agree with the 4 zones and we're going with them gung ho. This can evolve over time. I just want to get a sense of, are you generally behind this concept? And it sounds like the answer is yes, which is very helpful for us to know. We will have additional questions as we move along. I have one last question. I hope if it starts down a rabbit hole, then we can stop it and we can discuss it later. But in terms of just how you enforce this moving forward, what is this body's feeling about special permits? Do you like using special permits? Do you like the flexibility and control that they give you? Would you like to try to reduce the use of special permits in this district, make it more by right? I just wanted to get your general pulse on how this body feels about the use of special permits.
By right.
John, you said by right, John?
I agree.
By
Okay.
right, yes.
Yes,
Bob?
I agree.
I agree.
By right is what we've been moving towards. And if there is a special permit, we would like to be the special permit granting authority.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Great. And that is, again, one of the advantages of form-based code is if you take care of a lot of these details up front, make it by right, hopefully that does become a faster process for everyone. Thank you. That's very helpful as we
That was one of the reasons why we were pursuing form-based, because it gave more definition to begin with.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward on this. I think it's a great concept. One of the concerns I have is that the state and the town are actually designing a rotary for 28 in that area. Not gone to public hearing or anything yet. And if there's any indication of what happened in East Falmouth, where there was a huge uproar, and they finally get a committee and they work long and hard to try and address these issues. And they were reasonably successful. Now they have to go for another section further east. But there was a lot of activity on people getting concerned about what was going on in that area. Now, this is peripheral to what you're doing, but I think it's important because we're going to have all these different activities going on, perhaps at the same time, and they're going to start overlapping. And the second point I was going to make, I'm wondering whether we get the zoning set up, whether we're going to look at a phased approach so people don't have to bite off the whole thing at one time. It might be a little more palatable on that area. Just a thought.
Okay, Charlotte?
I'd just like to say, because we are running out of time for this part of the agenda, that it would be very useful for the board to have a conversation with the help of Jeremy and Jeff on the pros and cons of new base zoning, overlay districts. What are the options for doing this, and what are the pros and cons for each one? I sort of think we ought to probably have a new and solid base instead of stuff bleeding up, but I'd love to hear a discussion that would involve the board, but would be guided by your experience in other places.
Okay,
Yeah, but we definitely intend to get that. That's definitely one of the things in our scope is, part of this is we start by just trying to understand generally what the vision is, generally what the intention is. And then it helps us begin to understand what tools might be a better fit or not. But then we all come back to you and talk through those options.
Okay.
Ultimately guide those.
thank you. I'm hoping you've gotten what you wanted tonight. Have you?
Yeah.
Or is there something still hanging out there?
No, the special permit was my last hanging thing for this evening.
Okay,
Yeah, this was very helpful. Thank you very much. Very much.
well, thank
appreciated.
you. We will
Thank
look
you.
forward to our next meeting with you. Thanks so much.
All right, take care. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now I will need a motion to move back to the original agenda, which then brings up multifamily housing subcommittee.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now, John has requested, he's put a tremendous amount of work into this, as you all know, for the multifamily housing. And we hope that we can see this put to use there at the plaza too, as it goes. But we want the multifamily housing before anything to do with the plaza. So, John, can you present a little bit of your idea as to how the committee would function, please?
Well, my thought was that first and foremost, whatever comes out of this has to be a total planning board concept. And you guys did the local comprehensive plan in the past, and you had 3 people on your committee. And so I was thinking that I have done a lot of work, but so has other people. Mr. Turkington has helped out substantially. Jim and I have had a couple of discussions about this. And so I thought if we had 3 people, it was like a subcommittee, have a couple of meetings, I think we could get through some of the what ifs and come up with something very substantial to present to the board. Almost even have a bylaw ready for the board to review. And I know it's not our job to write the bylaw, but we can be really close to it. Something that if this board, after some discussion, were to approve, would be able to go to the state and be approved by the state. I know it has to go to town meeting, but the language would be already as acceptable by state. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish tonight. Maybe have 3 people, have a couple of meetings, and really get this ready for the board to review.
Okay. Pam?
John, have you looked at any other communities, multifamily bylaw?
Yes.
Which communities did you check out?
I looked at Barnstable. I looked at Nantucket.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to be important, especially if it's a coastal community.
Well, not only that, I wanted communities where the language has already been accepted
Right, exactly.
by the Commonwealth and by mass housing. And what they've done isn't exactly what I think the town of Falmouth is going to want to do, what our board's going to want to do, but it's really close. There's some really good comparisons there.
And it's always easier when you have something to go on substantial, which is where John is wanting us to go right now, then the full board can look at it. It's just like the LCP. We put it together and we brought it to the board and let you slice and dice it before it ever went to town meeting. Paul, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, I do have a comment. John, thank you for your efforts. I think it was a good start on doing this, and I know how important it is to you. I was also pleased to see Ed Curley's letter in support of the bylaw. I thought that was very, very helpful. I'm a little concerned about the subcommittee because the local comprehensive plan was a subcommittee of planning board. Now, this doesn't have to be a subcommittee of only planning board members. You mentioned Eric Christensen and perhaps even Ed Curley, or perhaps others that might want to participate in this to get a better document because they know a lot more about the housing situation than, for example, I do.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's always good to have a community person who has been involved with similar issues like Eric has. So I think that's a great idea.
Charlotte?
I think it's a good idea to have the community involved, but they don't necessarily have to be part of the subcommittee. As long as the subcommittee, if it's planning board members, then we can control the timing on the whole thing. We can call in any other people we want who may or may not appear and get advice and input from them, which is a good thing to do, but it wouldn't be losing control of the timing. I'd like to point out, maybe you don't recall, 2.5 or 3 years ago, while Brian Curry was still here, Pat and I had spent some time on coming up with a multifamily planning zoning. What would the bylaw look like? And it is different from this, but it's not markedly different. It's very similar, which isn't at all surprising. We've been trying to do this for 3 years. And I think that broadening out the committee as an official committee is guaranteed to slow it all down. There's no need to do that. I think there's already very good agreement on this. We can have it ready quickly if we keep control of the timing by keeping the subcommittee, officially the voting members of the subcommittee, just members of the planning board.
And as you know, if it, as a subcommittee, it has to be no more than 3 members of the planning board. Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think it worked very well with the LCP committee because we'd bring in 4 or 5 people depending on what the topic was at the time.
Right.
And we were able to narrowly focus the work of that meeting or those meetings because some of the groups we met multiple times with over a course of several months. So I think if you do expand an entire committee with a bunch of other people, it does get bogged down as opposed to a smaller committee that's going to keep a laser focus on what the agenda is about and what you're trying to glean from it.
You know, is this an appropriate time to read Ed Curley's letter instead of in the letter section?
Sure.
Okay. Hello, my name is Edward Curley of 36 Meadowview Road in East Falmouth. I am the chair of Falmouth's Affordable Housing Committee, AHC, and my comment is related to Tuesday's Planning Board agenda topic entitled Multifamily Housing Subcommittee. I have copied Pam Harding Barrett, as she is the vice chair of the AHC, as well as a member of the Planning Board. The AHC heard a presentation from John Drewley at our meeting in February 2020 regarding his proposed draft, Falmouth Affordable Housing Multifamily Bylaw. The AHC also held a discussion of the July 1st version of this proposed bylaw at our Zoom meeting in July 2020. At both of these meetings, members of the committee expressed strong support for the enactment of such a bylaw. Falmouth currently has an inadequate amount of affordable housing and is deficient in meeting the state requirement that 10% or more of its year-round housing stock should qualify as part of the subsidized housing inventory, SHI. Allowing up to 20 dwelling units per acre in B2 zones by right with planning board approval after site plan and design review will be just what Falmouth needs to gradually increase housing units in town that are affordable for its workforce, its seniors who wish to downsize, and its adult children who wish to reside in Falmouth. The current draft of this bylaw that is under discussion by the planning board is a sensible and measured approach to addressing this important issue. Thank you for your consideration of our committee's support. So we do have the support of the Affordable Housing Committee to move forward expeditiously on this. Now, the question is, how do we wish to form that committee? I think John definitely should be part of it and the chairman of it, if you will, for the planning board. But we would need 2 other members. Pam?
I would love to be on the committee.
Okay. Anybody else? We've got Charlotte and Jim who both raised their hands. We can only have 3 folks. So what do we do here? Pam,
know
is it? Go ahead, John.
Jim has already put quite a bit of time in this. We've had multiple discussions about it. He's helped me with the zoning concepts. And I think if Jim's on the committee, it'd be very helpful.
Okay. So Pam and Charlotte, Pam, you're on the Affordable Housing Committee. Is it possible that it might be more beneficial if you weren't part of the writing? I'm throwing this out because then you would have potentially a, what would you call it? An interest in keeping it as it is, instead of being able to present it better to the community and the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm throwing that out. I don't know.
I totally missed what you were trying to say.
Sometimes it's better to be apart from something to be able to present it in an apart sort of manner, to be more of a cheerleader for what came out of it rather than being an author. I don't know that that's true. I'm throwing that out. I don't know.
I think they should buck up.
You think what?
They should just buck up, see who wins.
Oh, okay. However, I don't know. What do you want to do? Scissor, paper, Paul?
Can I be on it?
So you want it as a committee of the whole, huh?
Make it complicated.
Charlotte?
I'll defer to Pam if she wants, but she's already deep into affordable housing and has a platform for it. I started out on this as volunteering for the multifamily housing thing 3 years ago and didn't manage to get it to move forward. We changed town planners. It never got on the agenda, although I kept bringing it up. So it's been frustrating to me. So I'd very much like to be there and talk about it, particularly about the zoning of it, and be on that subcommittee.
What do you want to do? Flip a coin?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very averse to conflict, which is probably why I'm a psychologist. So I will defer to Charlotte. Charlotte wants to, serve on this committee, then I will defer.
Thank you, Pam. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I owe you one.
And I really hope, Pam, that you will be a good salesperson for whatever we come up with.
Well, you have to understand, I am so committed to affordable housing, and we can't move ahead with affordable housing until we have a multifamily zone.
Right.
So for me and my commitment to affordable housing, this just fits in. You can't do one without the other.
Okay.
So that was part of the reason. That was the reason I wanted to be on there, because I wanted to push this forward as quickly as possible. So.
Thank you. I'm glad we didn't have to flip a coin or come to blows on it. Thank you very much,
Never.
both of you. Jim, yes?
Yes, Pam is welcome at all the meetings.
No, she can't. That's the problem.
Oh, she's a planning board member. I forgot. That makes it 4.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. I'm sorry. Anyone else? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Paul?
I forgot about that.
Now that we have a committee, I would encourage the committee to move as expeditiously as possible. We're waiting a long time, and this is an important element, so we don't want this thing to drag out months and months. So I hope we move forward on this very quickly.
I will share something with you. John was very kind to send me the draft of a potential bylaw that he's got really very, very close. And Eric Turkington sat down with me also. So I think it will not take too long to come to where we need to be to have this draft bylaw. I think I'm pretty correct on that, right, John?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay. So I really hope that we see this rather soon. Thank you all. Tom?
I just wanted to point out that in some of the information that we forwarded prior to this meeting included tips on drafting bylaws produced by Bob Ritchie. Bob, as you know, is one of our zoning recodification consultants. He's a former assistant attorney general or general counsel with the Department of Agriculture, and has done a lot of these zoning things. So in the email that you got prior to this, and I'll send it again to the entire board on those tips of writing the zoning bylaw.
They can print it off, Tom. It's not very many pages.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because you get a lot of emails that you were noting that one and sort of following those as sort of your guidelines for getting to.
Okay. I did not go through all of them, but it is guides for doing a bylaw. Okay, thank you. Moving on. We've got 15 minutes before we turn into pumpkins. Site plan review. Michaela did a lot of work on this. I have not had time to review it. Does anybody have any comments on it? Because you got quite a lot of information in a very short period of time. Jim? Jim, you've got to unmute.
My only comment is, I think our real problem is definitions of what a structure is. And we didn't address that. Our building commissioner is determining, well, what we're building in some of our places, he's not calling them structures, are so big, have so much concrete, and are 60 to 90 feet wide. I think we got a problem there. And that's all I wanted to point out.
Well, Michaela did a lot of research on this, and she said she gave us hints as to what we might need to be looking at for site plan review in her forward to all of that, which she sent. What I think I would like to suggest is that it go on perhaps the next agenda after we've all had a chance to review it and think of it, because I don't know that we can do a proper discussion tonight. I know I feel I can't, but I don't know about anybody else. Yes, John.
I agree with you. There's a tremendous amount of information. A lot of it came in just yesterday.
Right.
But my question would be, what is it that's not, someone feels that's not correct about our current site plan review? I've heard antiquated. I'd really like to have maybe a list and an explanation as to what is wrong with what we have right now. I've heard the 25-year floodplain, drainage. I just understand the difference between that and 100-year. So I'd like to have maybe a short list of what we should be looking at and why.
And Tom?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues of our site plan bylaw as it currently exists is the threshold is 1,000 square foot of change. And I think the poster child for that is the property on Palmer Avenue that they tore down the gas station and rebuilt the entire gas station. And there was no site plan review by the planning board because the net effect was 1,000 square foot and change. If you've got an 8,000 square foot building and you want to build an 8,500 square foot building, that's only a 500 foot change in the footprint. That doesn't require site plan review under our bylaw. And so essentially, and I'm going to make the most extreme example I can, is that the mall, let's say it's 2 million square feet. If they decide to build 2,000,005 square feet, then they can tear it down and rebuild the whole thing with no site plan review because there's not a change in square footage over 1,000 square feet. So I think that's one of the principal issues that's a concern of is that the bylaw has a threshold of a net change of 1,000 square feet, where you could go in and demo an entire site as they did for the Shell station there, built a new storage, built a new store, new parking and all that stuff. No site plan review, none at all.
I just have to say, that's a travesty, what happened there. And I understand, I'm sorry?
It's our bylaw.
Oh, I know. But what I'm saying is I just think it was a travesty. It was very detrimental to the owner of the property, and not to have had a site plan where there could have been some input. I think it's going to be a disaster there when this is finished.
Charlotte?
Clear from the examples that were sent to us with the yellow highlighting, that the focus of change will be on either reducing or eliminating entirely a square foot threshold for a site plan review. So that would be one of the issues. And there were a couple of others that were raised. We could go through the yellow highlighting ourselves before the next meeting, because it's true, we didn't have a lot of time to do this, but I don't see, of the yellow highlighted things at least, what the suggestion would be for solving the problem we all agree is a problem, which is the ground-mounted solar structures. How do we cast the net so that they need site plan review?
So we've got our, yes, John.
So under the example that Tom just gave, anything that's going to get redeveloped is going to have a site plan review. That's what I'm understanding. That
Could
not
I
a
jump in
thousand
for
square,
just a
not 1,000 square feet of change. Any change is going to require a site plan review. Some of the examples that got sent out, some of the towns said if you paint more than 500 square feet of your building, you have to have a site plan review. I mean, that's why I want to get a little bit better idea of what the thoughts are here, so that we can go forward and maybe adjust our site plan review, and maybe not.
Well, John, I think this is a good start, but we have to take a look at this and then have an in-depth discussion as to, and we could have this from the perspective of Tom and Michaela, from their own perspective too, as to
Yes.
where we might be lacking and that we need to fill in or change. So do you agree, all of you, that you'd like to see this on our agenda for, what is it, the 25th is our next meeting?
I agree, certainly. And actually, John, this seemed to present a range, because Burlington won't allow you to do anything without having a site plan review. No structure, premise constructed, reconstructed, altered, or without, to places that are saying, placing limits that are tighter than ours, 500 feet, certain number of parking spaces, so that the issues are there. It's just, where do we want to paint the new line? Tom, do you have some suggestion on the ground-mounted solar structure issue?
You got to unmute, Tom.
Thank you. I was
Okay.
I was 4 screens away on another screen over here. I think that to Jim's point, the definition of structure is an issue there. But I think that you take small steps, and one of those is identifying the things that you would need to fix that's, just blatantly wrong with this, that threshold, where that threshold is. You're building a structure that's a minimum of 5,000 square feet, whether you're building or rebuilding. Usually there's a number of parking spaces, because the number of parking spaces tends to trip stormwater review. So the thresholds for when you would have a site plan amendment, it wouldn't necessarily be for every use. It would be for uses of a particular size. And as I've said before, the planning board does site plan review on single family houses under the accessory housing bylaw, which I don't think, we should be doing a site plan review on single family houses, but we do when it's under the bylaw. So there would be a threshold for what you look at to look at a commercial development that you would have that site plan review.
You're saying just include those words, ground-mounted solar, somewhere in the site plan review bylaw. Just to bring it to a conclusion, what you said.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly appropriate to have something to the effect in the site plan review that says if you're adding solar onto the site, that would be reviewed as part of the site plan review. So maybe that's one of those thresholds, is that you're doing, the building's 4,000 square feet. Here's a trigger. The building the site has 10, 15 parking spaces. There's a trigger. The site has new solar panels provided that are going to expand the amount of impervious surface. Those are those thresholds we'd look at to include in that.
We also might want to look at the definitions section of our bylaws too, because it's not what is a structure?
Well, what Bob and Bob were trying to do is make increase clarity of the bylaw by putting things together that need to be thought of together rather than scattering them here and there in the definitions in the site plan. So you'd want it in the site plan review language somewhere if that's the intention.
Yeah,
Correct.
I would say this, that because we're talking about what we might bring to town meeting, I think it's perfectly appropriate to have site plan review bylaw and a definition for structure that supersedes the existing definition we have for structure.
Mhm.
Keeping the definitions where they're supposed to be. We don't want to start picking the bylaw apart to unrecodify it by having definitions in various sections, but I think it's perfectly appropriate to have for a town meeting move to amend site plan review bylaw, move to amend definition of structure as those two sort of companion articles together.
Okay. Well, are we going to put this on next week's agenda to work on it?
That would be fine with me. I do have and did produce a schedule for town meeting in what we're looking at here. If I can bring it up on the screen for just a moment. Let's see, that looks like it might be the site plan review bylaw, but relatively unreadable, likely. So let's make it a little bigger here. Can you see that a little better?
Mhm.
All right. So this is where we're at presently, 8/18, with the planning board having this discussion about the warrant. The warrant actually closes on 8/28. That is the end of next week. It's closing earlier than it typically would. It's usually a Labor Day closing. So we would have that time over the next week to look at what we were going to produce and put together for a town meeting. Upon my recommendations previously is recodification and the site plan review bylaw. There are a couple of tweaks to the zoning map as well that kind of came out of the recodification. So we would essentially be looking at 3 articles: recodification, site plan review, now with that ancillary change of the definition of structure, and the changes to the zoning map that will basically come out of the changes to the recodification. So with that, that's what we would have to talk about next week. I did want to talk to the board specifically about the recodification and making sure it was fine with the board for me to distribute that information to various engineering, architectural, and legal firms that we talked about before, to have that in their hands for them to take some review. Warrant closes on 8/28, and then we would have an ad in the paper on September 9th for a hearing for town meeting articles that begins on 9/29. That would be the 4th meeting for September. But we've got things to do, and we've just recently gotten our full-on zoning recodification to us. I would not want this to rest another 6 months recodification. I would like to get that out and have it discussed and have it vetted. And if it fails at town meeting, that would be unfortunate because it is a large unwieldy thing. But I think we've got to press forward with this to get those discussions started and try to move the ball on recodification, because it's very hard to change other parts of our bylaw when we're going to have to renumber everything and move things around. It's just it's one of those things we've been waiting for very long to get to. It's now with us, and I think we need to move on it.
Okay. So we have moved on then to town meeting potential articles, recodification, and site plan review bylaw. May I have comments, Charlotte?
I'm all in favor of sending out the recodification to all the people who are going to be its users, to the lawyers, to the engineers, to the people who appear before us, to anyone who wants one, and have good public hearings on it and be able to really have a feeling that it has support before it goes to town meeting. It's the middle of August. I don't think that there's really time for that process between now and the next town meeting. The Julian Suso has asked people to be careful about trying to place things on the warrant because look at the trouble the charter review got into. That's hanging over us from April, and people couldn't get to it. I think it's a bit much, but if the recodification could get out for its review and vetting and aim toward the Springtown meeting, it seems as if that would be a better timeline for acceptance.
Anybody else?
I agree.
Well, I agree too. It's not a matter of whether it passes or fails, but I don't believe there's enough time because between now on the 18th and the 28th, when the warrant closes, it's 10 days.
Right.
And even if we sent it out, we haven't a ghost of a chance of getting any comments back
No,
from people. I don't know what you think, but I think a cover letter with that, with our desires, and just instead of just sending it out and say, here you go, have at it. I think a cover letter going out to ask people to meet certain expectations, to really review it. As you know, we've all heard that Falmouth is an impossible place to do business in if you're a builder. And I'd like to hear comments as to whether this is any improvement. What changes, what other changes they might see that might take place in a phase 2. In other words, a fuller reading and discussion of it, which I do not believe we would get at this point in time between now and November. So, John?
I agree with that, and also the same with the site plan review. I think it should be something for the Springtown meeting, both of them.
Yes,
I
I
agree.
do as well,
Yep.
because we're right up against a closer deadline. And I just don't think either one of them would have the full vetting of the board, much less what we need to get from the public.
Right. At this point,
Jim?
only Pam and I have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, but I still want to send it out right away.
Yep.
I don't
Oh,
want to
I'm not-
delay sending it out to everybody. Let's get it out next week and let them watch town meeting, say, well, with no reason we couldn't have done it here, but we got to get the community thinking about this and we should do it right away.
Jim, I completely agree with you. My thought of putting a cover letter on instead of just blasting it out, it makes it just a little bit more important what we're trying to achieve by the recodification. We know what it is, but does anybody else out there know what it is? Yes, Charlotte.
I think your idea of the cover letter is perfect. And shouldn't the cover letter specify a way to give us input?
Yes, it should.
It should. You know, let us know what you think. Here's the way to let us know. We'll
Right.
be holding some form of hearings on this, but we'd really like to know your impressions as soon as you could. They could send them to us in writing. They can email them. So they have several ways that are easy to give us feedback.
Yes, that is the point of, yes, Paul? Unmute, Paul. There.
I hate to put it off. I don't think there's enough time to do it for a number of reasons. Not only the review of everyone, but also my granddaughter just walked through with a plate of cake, but not for me. And ice cream. There's supposed to be a town meeting in September. They're talking about truncating the articles on that town meeting, which means is going to be pushed off until November. And the November town meeting is probably going to be so long that will go 3 or 4 nights. So putting this on the agenda would be almost impossible.
Well, that's exactly what Julian has begged for, is not to do things like this for the November town meeting.
Right.
They still have to finish Springtown meeting.
Correct, and he points that out.
So
Okay, so you all wanted to blast out by next week, but with a cover letter. How do you get your comments back to us? What are we looking for? in the way of comments or any and all comments on it.
Yeah, sounds right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Future agendas for pending applications. You have a list of those. On August 25th, we put in site plan review, and we have Woods Hole Partners, DEF continued, Barnstable County Fairgrounds, solar SPR decision, and there are 3 ANRs. Fender on Lewis Neck Road, CPIT Road, and Benjamin Nye Road. So that seems like it's a decent agenda, and I'm sure there may be 1 or 2 other things that come up. And then you see what's so far on September 8th. Are there any announcements? Okay. We did read the 1 general correspondence we have, and we have the future agenda items that I just went over. And our next meeting is next Tuesday, August 25th on Zoom, same time. And John, I'm sorry, we're 6 minutes over the hour and a half. Yes,
That's all
Tom.
right.
Tom, oh, bye.
Move to adjourn.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, and thank